Georgette said, I'm the curator and archivist of Sylvester Manor Educational Farm on Shelter Island. Sylvester Manor is considered to be the most intact northern plantation remnant. It began in 1651 when Nathaniel Sylvester and three partners acquired the 8,000-acre island for use as a provisioning plantation for their sugar operations on the island of Barbados. The price they paid to the Connecticut governor who owned the island was 1,600 pounds of Muscovado sugar, with an additional payment of 800 pounds of sugar to the Manhansett tribe of Native Americans who had occupied the island for a millennium. Nathaniel Sylvester was an Englishman raised in the Netherlands who brought enslaved Africans with him from Barbados to perform the plantation labors of clearing and farming the land, raising livestock, harvesting timber to make barrels stave for sugar and molasses, and to serve in his house. His descendants continued their slave ownership until 1820, long after their connection to the West Indies had ended. For over 3 centuries, Sylvester descendants have owned the increasingly diminished land holdings, and in 2014, the 11th generation heir, Eben Fisk Osby, donated the remnant plantation core of 225 acres and the 1735 Manor House to the nonprofit Sylvester Manor Educational Farm. Founded in 2010 by Osby and his nephew, Bennett Knesny, the organization's mission is to cultivate, preserve, and share the history of Sylvester Manor to ensure that food and art remain connected to community and the land. These descendants chose to give the place away, to open its gates and memories to all, to tell all of the stories, openly and honestly promoting dialogue and insights on the history that had remained untold until this time. The Manor House, constructed by Nathaniel's grandson, Brinley Sylvester, in 1735, has been continuously occupied by masters, enslaved people, indentured servants, family members, and now today by the crew of our farm during the spring through autumn season. Little is known of the lives of those who arrived with Nathaniel and his wife Grizzle in 1651. In his will, read after his death in 1680, 23 names are listed of enslaved African people he bequeathed to his children, keeping couples together but dispersing their children. To tell their stories, questions must be asked and assumptions made, but answers not found in the documents can sometimes be felt in the very place. As you enter the white gates of Sylvester Manor and begin the long drive up the gravel driveway, the outside world drifts away, replaced by the sounds and silence of the forest. At the fork of the road, a mighty oak stands before a circle of pine trees, surrounding an old picket fence. A large stone placed beside the road in 1884 by the family reads, "Burying ground of the colored people of Sylvester Manor since 1651. In the early 2000s, archaeologists from the University of Massachusetts at Boston, with ground-penetrating radar, determined that this site contains the remains of over 200 persons believed to be the African and Indian people of Sylvester Manor. There are no markers listing their names, and the only delineation is the placement of field stones and what can be discerned as grave mounds. The history of slavery at Sylvester Manor is lacking in the thousands of letters and documents held in the Manor House for over 3 centuries. Names of the enslaved are mentioned in last wills and testaments, inventory documents, or in various letters and papers. But the memory is still all around us, left behind as almost a living thing in the physical space. Feelings are evoked as you enter the drive, walk the burying grounds and woods, roam the rooms of the house and the attic where the enslaved and indentured lived. The imprint is strong in the sway of the trees in the breeze, the smell of the water, and the call of the birds. Visitors often remark on the effects the place has on them, sometimes before they even have heard any of the story. There is a calling here, memories and secrets. Enslaved African people were brought here against their will, kept on an island by force and circumstance, but with determination to survive. The enslavement, the masters, the work, land, isolation, weather, and history itself. Manumissions and finally emancipation in 1827 set them free to leave, to make a life away on the seas or in another town where they could use their skills to support themselves. The manor was left behind. New lives were begun closer to New York City or locally in the community of Eastville here in Sag Harbor, where men could go to sea, finding work aboard whaling ships. For me, growing up here in Sag Harbor, I was totally unaware of the history of the manor or its very existence. But from my first visit, I have sensed its pull and felt the calling. When I go to the burying ground, I speak their names out loud. Curator and Hannah, the first African couple owned by Nathaniel's wife, Grizzle Sylvester, brought to Shelter Island from Barbados. Their daughter, Hope, the first African child on Shelter Island, and her sister, Isabel. This family of enslaved people lived and worked their whole lives at the manor and are among those who rest within the fence of the burying ground. I call to Matilda, who was first mentioned in the 1765 inventory of property of Thomas Deering. Deering had married Mary Sylvester, the daughter of Nathaniel's grandson, Brindley. They came to Shelter Island from Boston, and we don't know if they had inherited Matilda or if they brought her with them. Matilda may be among those who were left behind at the manor when the family fled in exile during the Revolution. And for her faithful service, she was manumitted and granted her freedom in 1795 after Deering's death. However, with freedom, she had no other choice but to borrow money from the same family to rent a house and property and land on the property. She spent her remaining years paying it back. But triumphantly, Matilda's single name appears on the Shelter Island 1810 census as a free person of color and head of her household. Only snatches of her story are written down, but the sense of her presence and existence is strong at the manor. For me, recently at an exhibition of paintings by artist Charles White at the Museum of Modern Art, I felt I had glimpsed her face and felt her strength, her struggle, and her pride in one of his paintings, and I called her name, Matilda. Freeborn, Julia Did Havens Johnson served as the housekeeper for the manor for over 40 years, and she is the last known person to be laid to rest in the burying ground in the early 1900s. Her stepfather, an enslaved man named Comus Fanning, had purchased his freedom, and with his wife Dido, saved enough money to buy 23 acres of prime land on Shelter Island from the Deering family, only to have it bought back by the same family at far below market value from Julia, who had inherited the land. The sense of story is strongest in the attic of the manor house. The upstairs space served many purposes over the years, as storage for a family's possessions, trunks containing dresses, letters, boxes, and paintings still are there. Archery sets, picnic supplies, memories of the family who owned the house, and more. The presence of two young boys is felt most of all. They were brought to the manor by their mother in 1828 when she placed them in indentured servitude. William and Isaac Farrow were 9 and 5 years old and were members of the Montaukett Native American tribe from East Hampton. Their indenture was set to last until they were 21 years of age. The evidence of their life at the manor is left behind in the indenture papers describing their service and in the drawings of ships they carved on the attic walls in the space where they slept. 43 drawings in all fill the walls, ranging from simple triangle shapes to intricate rigging of clipper ships. When I walk through the woods of the manor, I imagine the night 19-year-old William Farrow ran away. He'd found a ship in Greenport willing to take him on, picking him up in an appointed spot during the night. He escaped 2 days after the girls of the house he'd grown up with were sent to boarding school. Creeping quietly down the stairs from the attic, he passed the bedroom the girls no longer occupied, down to the kitchen and into the night, running through the woods to the water, to a ship, and finally to freedom, never to be heard of again. His brother Isaac fulfilled his service, but remained at the manor for the rest of his life and is buried in the burying ground. Only William's signature on the attic walls remains of his presence. Uncovering and telling these stories is the work that I do at Sylvester Manor. Secrets and treasures reveal themselves as documents, letters, ephemera are found everywhere in the house, adding to and expanding the narrative stories we tell, and making the memories available to be shared and felt by all who visit. This is the calling that I've answered from the manor. Thank you.